been talking about this a lot. I did a speaking event in San Diego yesterday. Got a chance to get some feedback with with Republican women and stuff. And this business about the Republicans have a philosophy but not a brand, I think that's really, 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 really important. The thing that's becoming clear to me in the last week is that people could vote for a guy like John Fetterman or Biden for that matter, as I said before, because they love Bobby Kennedy so much. They know what the Democratic brand is. If you say woke politics, you don't have to like it, but you know what it is. And we have principles and we have philosophy and all of that, but we don't have. It's not a brand. It's not a vision. It's not a clearly articulated, repeated vision on what it means to be a Republican. All it really means to most people is you're the guys who say no to everything. And that development of a brand, the only reason I keep coming back to this is because it's clear to me what happened is that on the midterms, people came out and voted for the brand. You can't vote for Fetterman. He's clearly he's not there.
His brain is pudding.
But you can vote for the brand. You know that if you vote for Fetterman, either Fetterman's going to have a Democrat helping him through the process, or he'll be replaced by a Democrat, but you're buying the brand. And crafting that brand message is my new mission, is trying to figure out how to get that down to something really, I don't want to say pithy because I don't want it to sound phony, but condensed, clear, simple, 3 lines. That's it. This is what we believe in. And we've had this conversation before about how, at least going into the election, and certainly to some degree after it, there was a large shift of Latino voters and to some degree Black and women voters towards the GOP, but it's not towards the GOP. It's away from the Democrats. So where's our brand advertising to make them want to come here, not just to run away from Pepsi?
I don't know if this is like the normal course of the way the world works, but you could make the argument that the best thing that Republicans have going is Democrats. Because the transitions we're seeing of people moving from Democrats to Republicans are largely not because they're saying, oh, you Republicans, you have it all together. They're really just trying to escape a world that seems increasingly alien to them. And I say that of people who came into this country as immigrants, who are looking at Democrats and going, wait, this is not my country.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. But wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice if instead of them just running away from the Democrats and finding themselves, wouldn't it be nice if they said, wait a minute, those guys actually make some sense. I like the sound of that,
Yeah, try Coke because Pepsi sucks.
The flip side of that, though, is I believe the problem is real, and we would be doing much better if we had a damn brand. But in some ways, the problem isn't as bad as it seems. It's just unbalanced. To dredge up something that Democrats love to say about 2016, Republicans last week won the popular vote, and it wasn't even close. We got like 5 million more votes for congressmen and senators than the Democrats did.
Just not in the right places.
That's good, exactly. In the districts that mattered, in the states that mattered, like Pennsylvania, not enough people showed up to make the difference. And of course, we know what goes on in Philly and probably Arizona as well. That said, it's much harder to seal a bunch of congressional districts. I don't worry about that as much. But in those swing districts, we didn't present enough of a message. And some of that is weak candidates. Some of it is our lack of a brand. And we've got to accept this new reality until we can get it changed, that ballot harvesting is a thing. And instead of winning votes, we got to go out there and harvest ballots. It sucks. It's un-American, but we've got to play the game that the Democrats have set up, and we've got to play it better than them until we can fix it.
Well, I want to come back to that in a minute, but the main point I'm trying to make here is let's take Fetterman and Oz, right? It's probably the clearest example in the last week. So Fetterman is incapacitated. There's no question about it. He wins this election over Oz because Oz was a poor candidate. I think everybody agrees he wasn't a particularly strong candidate. Terrible. But the reason that Oz wasn't a strong candidate was because Oz never had a coherent message of who Republicans were. If we had a brand, and that the brand was, look, I'm not talking about talking points. This is a different thing completely, right? Talking points are just that's just spin. if we had had a brand and had the party discipline to make sure that every candidate that was running as a Republican at least went through the motions of saying what that brand is, then we very likely could have made enough of a difference. So there's a group of people who are voting Democrat their whole lives. The change in the Democratic Party is pushing some number of them off the cliff, right? We don't know how many, but some significant number is just leaving them. How much more of a transition would there be if we presented something that was actually genuinely attractive and positive, right? We concentrate on the candidate, they concentrate on the brand. And that's why they elect these candidates. Dan Feinstein has not been able to finish a sentence, and neither is Nancy Pelosi. These people are gone, but they represent the brand. And I think there's, again, I come back to this all the time. I think that we've seen emotion and messaging used so effectively against us that we think inherently there's something wrong with it, that somehow it's not real. Like, oh, brand is just kind of advertising term. Well, it is an advertising term, but
advertisers move a lot of product. Yeah.
Yeah, it works. That's why Coke sells more stuff than RC, right? Because they are a known brand. And not to bring back this thing that I beat to death 8 years ago, but if you decide that you're just going to be a little less democratic than the Democratic Party is, if that's your only brand, now you're New Coke, right? Now you're something that the Coke drinkers don't like and the Pepsi drinkers don't like. You're right smack in the middle. You've walked away from a great brand, and if we look, the reason I'm going through this is because if we understood what the brand was, we would be able to deal with the attacks on our brand much, much, much better. For example, we want voter ID in order to vote because we think that voting is a right to citizens. And if you limit the vote to the people who are legally able to vote, you have some idea of how many votes go into the box. If you've got a voting machine, doesn't matter what it is, if you've got an election machine, right, you put 100 ballots in there and you get 40 for one guy and 60 for another guy, then you've got a pretty good idea that's an accurate vote. But if you presumably put 100 ballots into that box, meaning that's the number of registered voters, and one guy gets 60 votes, and the other guy gets 80 votes, now you know you got a problem because that number is greater than the number that could have gone in theoretically, right? So we want election integrity. We want IDs. Let's just stay with IDs. So I'm trying to work out what I'm trying to get across here. So we say we want voter IDs. Now, the Democrats say that voter IDs are a tool of white supremacy because it suppresses people of color who can't get IDs. I saw a guy, I've mentioned him before, young guy, conservative guy, goes to Berkeley or UCLA, asks all these white students, do you think requiring an ID to vote suppresses the vote? And every one of them says yes. And he says, why? He says, because it's much harder for people of color to get an ID. So he asked this question 5-6 times. You get all these young, rich white kids saying, of course, it's not fair to black people. Then he goes into a black neighborhood and says, do you think you should have to have an ID in order to vote? And all of the people there say, well, of course you should have to have an ID in order to vote. Of course. And then when he says there are college kids who are saying that people of color, I hate that term, but I'm going to use it because it's a term. People of color are not able to get an ID, or it's harder for them to get an ID. And some of them just plain laugh.
Yeah.
You know? And so when I say we have a brand, when people say, oh, you're wanting voter ID is vote suppression, you need to immediately be able to respond, say, so hold on, I'm saying that people who are registered to vote need to prove who they are. You're saying it's not fair because people of color cannot get IDs. You're saying that people of color aren't able to cash a check. They aren't able to buy alcohol. The idea of a black person getting on an airplane is completely beyond them. They think it's just a silver bird that's flying overhead. That's your opinion. That's your opinion of how black people are. Your opinion is that they're not capable of getting an ID when, in point of fact, everybody in this country has to have an ID in order to do the most basic things. And you cannot counterattack if you don't know what the moral ground you're standing on is. Right? And so we just let them do it. We just let them do it. No, it's voter suppression. It's not. It's cheating suppression.
Well, and I think when you get to the point, so you've just explained the philosophy of this, but when you're talking about the branding, even the language that we seem forced to use to talk about this, you actually used the phrase at one point, we want to limit the vote to those who are legally allowed to vote. That's not really what we want to do. We don't want to limit anything. We want to make sure that nobody steals your vote. And so when you bring your ID in, we make sure that no one else can take your identification. And so we're not trying to limit.
That's a much better way of putting it.
We're not limiting anybody. We're ensuring that nobody limits you.
Right. And we've had this, I don't know if we had this discussion last week, but this has been on my mind quite a lot. So let's take the abortion issue, right? We lose that issue. At least we lose a lot of people on that issue. The instant that we allow them to say choice. The second they say choice, we've lost, because we're the pro-choice people. We're the people who believe that you shouldn't have to take an injection that you don't want. We're the people who believe you should be able to work where you want to, whether it's a union state or not. We believe you should be able to control things in your lives better than the bureaucracy can. We believe you can spend your money better than the government can. Everything we're about is choice. And so the way you deal with that problem is when somebody says, well, I'm pro-choice, it's my body, it's my choice. You say, I'm completely in favor of choice, ma'am. I'm 100% with you on choice. I think as far as I'm concerned, you want to cut your hair, you want to cut your fingernails, you want to lop off body parts, none of my business. That's your choice. But when we're talking about abortion, that is not your body. It's in your body, but it's not your body. It's got its own DNA. It often have a different blood type, right? By any measure of standard of science, and you're the party of science, so you would know this, right? There is no question that the fetus inside you is not your body. It is not your body. It's a completely different genetic makeup. You didn't put it there by yourself, right? It's in your body, but it's not your body. So now we're not talking about the choice of what you do with your own body. I don't care what you do with your own body. I care about what you do with the body that's in your body. And now all of a sudden, you're no longer the anti-choice people, right? We're no longer the guys who are saying you can't get an earring piercing because we're going to control what you do. And no. We just keep missing the point. It reminds me of that. It was an ad lib moment, but I just remember it so clearly. You know, what's your opinion on free healthcare as a conservative? I'm 100% in favor of free healthcare. 100%. Who wouldn't be in favor of free healthcare? Of course, I'm in favor of free healthcare. Free healthcare for everybody. But it's not free. It costs a lot of money. And now, since it costs a lot of money and it's not free, now we have to talk about how to pay for it. If we're going to talk about how to pay for it, now we're on our ground and we're not on their ground. And this last week has been just me constantly realizing how the rhetorical intelligence of the left has been able to frame issues and questions so that you lose the second that you try to answer the question. And right? Because you've accepted the premise that they're building into the question.
It actually goes deeper than that. They are able to maintain their whole party of science brand even after their own Supreme Court nominee said she couldn't define what a woman is because she's not a biologist.
Right. So that's part of the brand. That's part of the Republican brand. I haven't got it worked out yet, but I'm cogitating and collating.
I think the other half of what you're saying, Bill, is to say, and this is where I think we often fall down as conservatives, because it can seem rather cavalier to just give the biological response and say, well, this is not your body, it's somebody else's body that's in your body, without acknowledging that in many cases, that pregnancy is not a volitional choice. Now, it's a small percentage relative to the overall number of these pregnancies that end in abortions, but there are quite a few cases where people are not intending to be pregnant and were, whether they were raped or it was incest, or let's take those cases that we tend to brush aside and say, oh, well, that's a fraction of a percent of whatever happens. No, we got to acknowledge that fraction of a percent. These are individuals, these are human beings. And so we say, look, we know that you're in a tough situation, whether that's because somebody did something horrible to you or because it was just a mistake and now you find yourself overwhelmed. We want to be there to walk with you through this process. We want to be in a position to set you up so that no further harm is done after the initial mistake or act of violence or whatever it was that resulted in that. We want to make sure that that other person that you now carry inside of you doesn't suffer harm as a result of a bad decision or of some evil that was done to you. So let's get you in a position so once you give birth, you can hand that child over to a loving family that's going to take good care of them. Or if you wish to raise the child, that let's pair you up with local resources where people can help you, whether it's a congregation or a local charity organization or individuals or family. But that that half of the equation that acknowledges, this is where the left wins because they look like they care. And I'm not saying they don't, by the way. I'm not one of these people on the right who's like, the people on the left are all evil all the time and all they want to do is increase the number of people that get killed. I think that there are many people on the left, many Democrats, many so-called pro-choice Democrats who think they are being compassionate.
I completely agree.
We fall down in that area because our compassion doesn't find expression.
And yet, in the space of 20 years, we went from safe, legal, and rare to let's have abortion up to the moment of birth. Or in the case of Montana now, let's have the ability to deny life-saving care to babies that are born.
This is where the Democrats are losing their own people, right? It is now part of the Democratic brand to not only be I'm not going to deal with these pro-life, pro-choice advertising terms. The left, the brand of the Democrats now is to be pro-abortion, not reluctantly pro-abortion, enthusiastically cheerleading for abortion, right? And so we find that morally reprehensible. And you're right, virtually all of the people that go in for abortions go in because I think the number of people that were actually raped or something like that is extremely small. Abortion's just used as birth control for people who didn't use birth control. So what I'm thinking I'm just spitballing things, right? I'm about as opposed to government handouts and government funded things as just about anybody on this earth. However, there are birth control options, right? Aren't there long-term birth control things they implant like
about
the size of
yeah.
And it lasts for how long? For a year or
I think it has to be done quarterly or twice a year.
Okay, let's say it lasts for a year just for the sake of the argument, right? I would be in favor of having the government provide those for free, even though that's against my principles, if it would significantly reduce the number of abortions, which is also against my principles, right? If you were to nobody's addressing the issue. We're addressing the outcome of the issue. The outcome of the issue is babies are being aborted, but the actual issue is people are having sex in a way that allows them to become pregnant. Now, the Democrats will tell you that they didn't want to become pregnant. That's why we're using abortion. We've all been there. We know what it's like, heat of passion, blah, blah, blah. But if we were to come out and say, listen, in the interest of preserving life, we are going to provide you with a much better version of, frankly, we don't have to necessarily say this. This is your responsibility, birth control. If you don't want to have any kids, then the technology exists. But if we made birth control the prevention of conception, if we were able to do that, I'd be willing to trade that for the number of human lives that we would save. And these are the kind of things that I'm talking about when we don't have a brand. We have a position, but we don't have a justification.
And I don't think it's so much the particular technique that we recommend to be able to deal with the problem. I think it's a sense of tone. It's a sense of conveyed compassion. And I think that's where we fall down. It's like, yes, we know how we feel. As a conservative, I know how I feel. And, I'm the guy who cries at McDonald's commercials, when the little kid falls down on the pond and Ronald comes up and helps him skate. I am very moved and very eager to help other people. I mean, I just spent Sunday at church with my wife and watched 2 sets of 450 volunteers each, one during each morning church service, pack food for a country in Africa. And they, in that just one morning at church, they packed 251,000 plus meals for people in Africa at one church in Texas. And I know this is happening all over the country. And the thing is, those people aren't going to generally stand up and crow about it, and I wasn't doing the work. These people were. I was just in awe of it and, trying to not trip over anybody. But I'm not saying we become more self-promotional, but I'm saying we should not be afraid of feeling something. We should not be afraid of acknowledging that somebody who looks at a woman who they can see, but is considering a baby who they can't see is much more likely to be moved by the plight of the woman, even if the woman's plight is much less threatening than the threat to the baby. The baby is a mortal threat. The woman is being inconvenienced in her career, perhaps. She's suffering a setback that's going to cost her time or money.
She's crying on TV and the baby isn't.
Yes, and I'm not trivializing that. For her,
no, I'm not either.
For her,
I'm just cutting to the chase.
That's a very real crisis. And if we sweep that aside and basically say, oh, well, we don't care what your situation is, that's no excuse. Well, that may be true, but I don't think it's true that we don't care. If that woman were in the room with you right now and she was sitting there weeping because she doesn't know what she's going to do because she wasn't planning to be pregnant at the age of 19 and she's still in college, or she was hoping to get into a trade school and now everything's screwed up, I think you'd feel for her. And I don't think you would just flippantly say, well, yes, you made your bed, you
go
lie
out there
in it.
and no. So while you were talking, I realized, yes. And this is how you cut the Gordian knot. And this is what I'm talking about, where so many of the issues that we're facing, we lose when we walk onto the field. And this was the genius of Andrew Breitbart. He could see those kind of traps, and he would just refuse to walk onto the field. So really what you're saying is the way you handle the abortion issue is you basically say to mostly single women, to women who would otherwise have gotten an abortion, right? You say to them, listen, let's just put all this garbage aside. We're actually on the same side, right? You didn't want to become pregnant and have this child or this fetus within you, whatever you call it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen either, right? We don't. We may not have the same reason for not wanting it, but we're on the same page. We both agree that you getting pregnant as a result of this encounter, which is what happens to human beings. I don't know a single person who hasn't been there at some point in their life, right? So I understand how this dynamic works. So we're on the same team here, right? You don't want to get pregnant. We don't want you to get pregnant unless you want to. So what can we do about that? And in a case like this, it may not be a perfect solution, but if you cut the number of abortions in half, if you cut the number of abortions by 10 or 1 or 100, that's a net gain, right? And what's the cost? There's no cost. If there's a government cost involved, then, and that's a solution, well, I find government solutions to be the last step of the ladder. But if that's what it takes to save these lives, then that's what we do. Yeah. So you basically make it exceedingly easy. But I still maintain that it's the long-term reversible. I cannot be clear enough about this, right? Long-term but reversible birth control. Something where you could get, if you could get something that lasted for a year or 3 years.
I looked it up. Norplant is great. It's a 5-year implant. It'll last for up to 5 years. It's got a success rate of 99.5%. So it has a failure rate of 0.05%. So
okay.
It's damn near flawless. The only issue is if I read this correctly, and I was just glancing at it because I'm trying to listen to you guys mostly, if I'm reading this right, it can only be used for the 5 years once, and then some alternate form of birth control needs to be found.
Okay. All right. Most women who are pregnant who don't want to be pregnant fit into an age group that's not a whole lot bigger than 5 years.
Exactly.
Right? You get 80% of them, I bet you, if you could do that. And
certainly more than half.
So now we're talking about look, again, I'm just trying to cut the Gordian knot, cut to the chase here. Now we're talking about just plain horse trading. And when I say horse trading, I mean horse trading of values, right? So what if you were to come out and say, listen, we will pay either voluntarily or through the government or whatever. We will pay for this. And not only that, we'll pay you $300 if you get it done, cash on the spot, right?
Okay.
That is against everything I believe in. But if you cut 60, 80% of the total abortions for that, that's a trade I'm willing to make.
And it's politics.
Right?
It is horse trading.
It's the reality of the world. And I can weight those two things in terms of importance to me on a moral scale. Yes, I don't like the idea of government doing handouts. I don't like paying people for these kind of things. I don't like that. But I like the alternative a lot less, So if that's what it takes to eliminate this or reduce it significantly, all I'm saying is these are the kind of conversations we should be having, and we're not. We're not addressing the issues. We're addressing the outcomes. And if we were to go at that place and especially incorporate Scott's repeated point that we're not doing this for political reasons or we're doing it because we're on the same side here, right? It's a catastrophe. You don't like it. It makes you cry. It makes us cry. So why don't we stop it? We can, Why don't we stop it?
I think there's also a place for conservatives to acknowledge the different role of men in this situation. Because while men and women are both involved, in some cases violently, but in other cases consensually, in the process, the man can walk away without a baby in his belly. He can walk away. I mean, he can go far away and never be accountable for that. And I think acknowledging that up front too, and telling the woman that I understand the situation you're in and it's not fair because you were both involved in this situation, but only you have to bear the burden, literally bear the burden of this decision. And I think everything that we're talking about here does something that I've been dreaming that conservatives would do for a long time. And that's not just be logical and not just be correct and, not just tell the truth, but actually make an attempt to persuade people who don't already agree with you. And the way you persuade people is by coming around to their side of the table and seeing it with their eyes and understanding it in their language. I've done a lot of study on marketing in the past year and a half. And one of the great lines from one of the great fathers of direct response marketing, he said, you enter into the conversation that's already underway in the prospect's mind. And that's how you persuade. And then when you write, you use the prospect's language. You use the way they think about it. You listen to how they talk about it, and you reflect that back to them. And what that does is that says to the prospect, so to speak, he's listening to me. He understands me. He gets me. And therefore, and it's funny because they say in direct response advertising, even it doesn't almost matter if you have a solution to the problem. The fact that you listened and can reflect back the actual language that people use to describe the problem makes them think you have a solution to the problem.
Absolutely.
I can give you a perfect real world example of exactly how well that works. I lost my best friend to leukemia back in '99, so it's been a long time. But he was a single guy, a bit of a wild man, and he had the perfect, flawless, almost 100% way to get a girl into bed. And you know what he did? He talked to her, he listened, and he repeated back to her what she had just said to him. And magic.
Yeah, we should.
Now, that's right. I don't want to imply that we're trying to get the prospect into bed, but we're trying to do something that's for the person's own good. But I'm giving you a real world example.
I'm giving you a real world example of how what you are saying works, and it does. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Is there anything equivalent to that implant that works on males?
Not yet. They keep promising a male pill. When they deliver, it's going to be huge.
What was that woman's name? Lorena Bobbitt?
The reason I say that is because you said, Scott, that the guy can just walk away, and that's true. He can walk away from the woman, and the woman's left there. But what also needs to be said is he can walk away unless somebody produces a DNA test, in which case he's going to have to be paying child support for the rest of his life, right? Until that child is 18. Those rulings are coming down all over the place. You turn out that you are the father of that child. You didn't marry the woman. It was a one-night stand. You're responsible for the child support there. So you've got an argument that you can make on the male side too. You can basically just turn this thing into hey, look, guys, we're not powerless over this thing. Right? Here's a solution. Makes everybody happy. Men can fool around and not have to worry about child support. Women can do whatever they want to. They don't have to have unwanted pregnancies. If you decide to have a child, you have this thing removed. Happy days, wonderful. It's almost like saying and I have to be very careful about this because I have a lot of moral questions with what I believe personally, but it's almost like what you're trying to sell is imagine a world where men and women having as much sex as they want to does not produce in any kind of conception. And in order for that to happen, you have to flick a switch that says, I want to have a baby, rather than hoping that you flick the switch that says, I don't want to have a baby.
And I don't know how it works with women. I'm not a woman. I will never be a woman. I will never identify.
Are you a biologist?
As a woman.
Are you a biologist?
Actually, it says biologist in my Twitter profile, but that's neither here nor there.
Then qualified to make that decision.
But when they do come out with the male pill, we won't need any reminders. Guys will be eating those things like popcorn.
Now, the other element of this, and we're going to get feedback on this from people who will say, why are you pushing people toward an immoral lifestyle? And I don't think that's the point at all. And I'm certainly not saying, hey, let's facilitate massive irresponsible sex among people, because there are more consequences than just pregnancy to fleeting relationships. Yeah. There's devastating emotional consequences that don't involve a baby. And so, I'm not, and I don't think Bill and Steve are suggesting that what we do is we try to sell free sex, basically. But
we're trying to sell harm reduction here.
At the same time, we exalt, like a friend of mine was a former alcoholic, and he said, he would tell teenagers, he said, look, if you wait to have sex until you have it for the first time with the woman that you've made a lifetime commitment to, you will always have the best sex that you've ever had. And basically he's saying, and if you don't do that, if you've tried the field, then there's always a little bit in the back of your mind that's kind of running a comparison. And say, I could have had so-and-so, she was better, or he was better. But exalting the emotional satisfaction of having somebody who cares about you so much that they've devoted themselves to you, excluding all others, and having that bond that goes on. My wife and I are approaching 30 years now. That is so awesome. Like, people are often surprised when I'm leaving work and they're like, oh, excited to be getting out of here? And I said, no, I'm excited to be going home to see my wife. And they're like, really? Haven't you been married a long time? Like,
I've gotten so spoiled. Melissa's been working at home for 2.5 years now. And today was one of those rare days she actually had to go to the office. And this house is so quiet. I don't like it. I married her because I want to spend all of my time with her. And I loved it when the lockdowns meant she started working from home full time.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just address the two things you mentioned, then probably time to move on, because I think we beat this to death already. In terms of the idea that we're endorsing an immoral lifestyle, to me, the essence of conservatism has always been what is real. The reason the Constitution works is because it takes into account human nature. It works with human nature and acknowledges human nature, rather than trying to say that no, people will behave. No, people will look after their own self-interest. That's why the Constitution works, because it addresses human nature. And if you're going to accept the reality on the ground, you realize that there's not that it's not conservatives that are promoting an immoral lifestyle. That immoral lifestyle is going on, and there's no denying that. So if you want to take this position, I'm not being flip here. I'm not trying to mock it. But to me, isn't the real issue, look, if these people decide to do something that you think is going to send them to hell, it's their decision. The thing that we are most concerned about is the innocent child that's a result of this, right? That child doesn't have a say in any of this, right? Yeah. So we're not promoting an immoral lifestyle. What we're trying to do is we're trying to minimize the damage that's a result of an existing moral lifestyle. And then that brings me to my second point, which is looking out at the wider scene of the pop culture. There is a rapidly growing sense among everybody, but especially among young women, that this idea of being, young girl boss who has her own $100,000, $200,000 a year salary, and they are cashing out of this fast. Women out there don't know why men aren't asking them out anymore. They don't know why they're not why the men that they do get to see on Tinder are such, trash. And more and more, I hear more and more women saying it's because we have not given men any reason to commit to us. All we do is bitch and yell at them. We don't give them any respect. We don't give them anything. We just constantly believe me, it's happening very, very, very quickly. Large numbers of young people are realizing that this bill of goods that they've been sold is just not true. And they are rebelling against it. They don't know exactly what to do in some cases, but I can't believe the number of videos that I've seen in the last month, either from women saying how badly men have been treated or from Black people saying how badly white people have been treated. That is really important. And so this then becomes part of the solution, right? Or we can keep doing what we're doing now, which I'm not.
It's not working. Yeah.
I'm not in favor of, because all we do is play defense and just get pushed a little bit further back, a little bit further back, a little bit further back. And on a good day, maybe we gain 2 yards and then we lose 7, right?
And you know,
I want to win.
Big picture here, and I'm only using this issue. I know we've kind of beaten to death, but I'm only using this issue because it's the one we've been talking about. And that is, if we want to make the case that long-term stable marriages that you raise your children in are a positive good, what better place, what better time to make that case than after we've taken the unwanted pregnancy thing off of the table and let people have a taste of this unfulfilling lifestyle that they think they want?
We can. Scott's got it right. It's not a lie. We're not lying when we say to these people, we want the same things that you do, right? That's not a lie. And that's not political prestidigitation. Yeah. It's true. You don't want to get pregnant and and deal with that. We don't want you to get pregnant and go through with that. So why don't we, the party that actually knows how to make things work, rather than the party of perpetuating misery, why don't we step into this 40, 50-year-old crisis that's been going on since the arrival of the pill? Why aren't we the ones that come up with a solution to this and present a better life and a happier life for everybody? That's how you win voters and win elections and keep them, right? And you can do this all across the board with immigration and healthcare and all the rest of it. Present a better alternative, but you're right, and say, we're presenting this because we care. We were fighting the old system because we care. But we got to do something different. And we got to do something different that does not sacrifice our principles, but rather amplifies them. I'm done.
Okay.